Yo, what's up? My name is Noah Halls here at Elementz, and in collaboration with Tellus Zine, Democracy MZ, and the Kennedy Heights Art Center, and WCPO, we bring to you this podcast. And with me, I have, and this is where you guys introduce yourselves.
Julius.
Julius, can you talk into the microphone?
Julius.
Cool.
Monique from WCPO.
Big facts.
And Chloe.
Chloe's a thug. No, stop. And our podcast today is going to be centered around social change. Maybe just a vague way of saying it.
I would say that today I'd really like to talk with you all about what you feel your purpose is in helping drive the social change that we obviously have, seen that we need in this country around racial injustice. Where do you, with everything that's been happening this year, do you feel like you've found some kind of inner purpose or intention or responsibility that you want to fulfill, that you want to contribute to the progress of this country and to the communities, especially around here in Cincinnati? Yeah.
I was thinking of a title. No. That's great though.
What is your role in this movement? What is your role in this moment in American history? I think that's the question we should be asking ourselves today.
That is an excellent question. Do you want to start with me, or
Okay.
one of you want? Well, personally, I think.
Before you get into your in-depth answer, I know your audience knows you fairly well, but perhaps if you can tell us a little bit more about your story to give us context.
Oh yeah, for sure.
On where your thoughts are in this answer.
Let me think. My name is I'll stop. When you say context, do you mean maybe
your upbringing?
Oh, okay.
Your
I
own
was not going there.
your
I have
own
no
racial
idea.
identity.
Yeah. So, I was raised Muslim. So my dad's Muslim, and I converted to Christianity earlier this year. So that's actually pretty fresh, and I've kind of been letting that lead me with all the decisions I make, or at least I've been trying to, and there are certain things that, I guess as a Christian person, you shouldn't be concerned with. Like one thing my pastor always says is that we're in the world, but we're not of the world. And by that definition, or with that being said, you'd have to imagine that politics should not be a priority for me. I shouldn't really be worried about it, but I am worried about it still. And so I try to be as involved as I can, as much as I can. And I think a big thing for me was voting this year. I actually went in person. So with the coronavirus, it was really hectic. I'll say that, but it still felt good to vote. That's pretty much the biggest thing. I don't know too much about the local stuff as much as I do with the federal stuff, but that's what I want to get into next. I feel like I have a responsibility for that, to study. Because I didn't really study too much. I just knew who I wanted to vote for. I knew who would support who I voted for, and that's pretty much it. But that's one thing that really I felt the responsibility. Voting is important to me. And that's pretty much it, I think. Does that answer your question at all?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. I guess I can also backpedal a little bit. Again, my name is Monique. I'm a reporter at WCPO Channel 9 News. I moved here to Cincinnati from New York a few months ago, back in the summertime, a few days after George Floyd was killed, and in the midst of just the chaos with the protests, the riots, the quarantines, the curfews, everything. And I'd never been to Cincinnati before. So it was a big jump. It was very exciting. I came here by way of a special program called Report for America that places young emerging journalists at local newsrooms around the country. WCPO being one of the very few TV newsrooms, because there are a lot of newspapers and radio stations as well in the program. But the program places young emerging journalists at local newsrooms around the country to report on specific topics. So I was brought here to Cincinnati to specifically report on gentrification, which has been a really exciting beat. I have really been enjoying my time in Cincinnati despite all of the chaos and just really, just the bizarre time that we're in with the pandemic, with the racial reckoning and the protests and the riots and things of that nature, with the chaos of the election, all these different things happening at once. But to go back to the original question as to what I feel my role is in this moment, in this movement, when it comes to driving racial progress, especially for Black America, I feel that my role is to be a truth teller, is to not only project the facts of what's going on in our communities or in our world, because oftentimes, especially in areas like Cincinnati, I feel that oftentimes people are actually quite aware and are quite passionate. But sometimes I would say oftentimes what happens is that the most marginalized people, and I think also sometimes the people with the most to say and the most valuable insights, actually end up getting marginalized from conversations, don't necessarily have the platforms and the visibility that they deserve and that they need to resolve whatever frustrations or issues that they're grappling with. So I feel very much that my role as a journalist in 2020, in this, in this new decade, in this also this digital media era, where our consumption of media, our production of media, of news, it's a very, very different landscape. And there are very different demands on it than before. I feel my responsibility is to use the platforms that I've been privileged to have to amplify the conversations that marginalized people are having that need greater attention, that need a sort of validation in mainstream spaces as a way to help bring urgency and attention to the issues that they're facing so they can get resolved.
Hi again, my name is Julius. I'm a student at Aiken High School and I'm a member of Democracy NZ. Growing up as a refugee from Rwanda, I grew up being scared of a lot of things, trying not to say it was not my business. But the older I grow, the more I surprise myself. I changed a lot. And my role, I feel like, is to tell people the truth too. And just let them be aware of what's happening in society, the injustice that have been happening. And when I joined Democracy NZ or any other programs that I usually join, not a lot of immigrants, Black women are in there. So I decided to be that one person to make a difference, to show a different perspective. And I just want different students, different people to know that you don't have to do what everyone else is doing. You can do your own things, and that's why I'm here. I'm gonna do me.
I'm Chloe, and I grew up in Madeira, so I live in a bubble, and I feel like my role in bigger issues such as the social inequalities we've been facing is to really boost marginalized voices, as you were discussing, because I have more platforms typically, which is a terrible thing to say. But my job is to not tell people that this is what's happening to these people. My job is to help those people tell the communities themselves and to say what they are facing from a firsthand experience, because I don't face those things. And I'm very privileged to be able to say that. And I feel like my job is to just help people get those things out there and get the truth out there in the world.
Chloe, I have a question for you. you obviously have a very sophisticated idea. I think we all do, but you have a very, very specific understanding of what you feel you need to do in this world. Is there like a story that you've done, or is there an experience you've had so far as a storyteller, as a truth teller, that was really formative for you, impactful for you, that had, that's really informed your vision for your work?
So I actually went to a protest in downtown Cincinnati in June. I don't know, sometime over the summer. And just hearing people speak and tell their firsthand experiences was something really, really moving to me because, as I've said like 3 times, I've never experienced something like that. And to hear these people say, like, yeah, I was the victim of police brutality because I just had the same skin tone is it. I mean, I knew it existed, but to hear it from a firsthand, like the person themselves, it really took me aback. And I was like, shoot, I have these platforms and I have this privilege that I can use to help these people speak out and tell their stories. And it was really moving to see all of the different communities be able to come together and just support these marginalized groups.
Julius, can you tell us more about the spaces that you signed up for to specifically be able to represent, the communities that you come from more? You spoke about the fact that you were seeing in certain spaces that there wasn't really a black woman, a young, black female voice, an immigrant voice there, and you felt that you needed to step into that space and help occupy that space. Can you tell us more details about those spaces? And also, if you feel like there's any kind of unfair amount of emotional labor that you have to put forward in order to do that work of being that representative there.
Can you explain the question?
Yeah, so, let's start telling me more about the spaces where you're kind of bringing a certain level of diversity. Places where you've really put yourself out there, and perhaps you might be a token in some way. You're obviously like a minority in some way, and what that experience is like for you.
I feel like right now I'm also like different here, cause like obviously I'm the only one immigrant. I'm the only immigrant here.
Oh, in this room?
Yeah.
Kind of, sort of. My family's, we're an immigrant family. But I am not a refugee. I'm not a refugee. So I do understand what you're saying there. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I feel like I face a lot more things, like, cause like being a refugee, and then being black too, and being a woman. Those are 3 different things, and society don't really understand about. I don't know.
Yeah. No. Would you say that are there certain perhaps microaggressions that you've experienced, especially since you've come here to the U.S., that have really had an impact on you? Like some kind of experience in which someone had said something that was offensive, whether it was well-intentioned or not, or perhaps ignorant, but that dehumanized you in some way? Are there experiences like that you could talk about that help
Definitely.
kind of inform people more about your perspective on these kinds of things?
So like when I was new here, I didn't really know English. So and then at school, I was like asked, why am I here? Where am I from? And it was weird because like the person who asked me that question was a black person. Like in my head, I was just like, you're black too. Like you're supposed not like to be on my side, but you're supposed to have a feeling of what that's like the struggle. So them telling me that, like telling me I don't belong where I am, really got me because I was like, how would you feel if they told you that? Like usually black people here are treated different, so you should know how that's like. Yeah, so that really got me.
How do you reconcile that kind of sentiment with still doing certain things that are ultimately beneficial to the Black community?
What do you mean?
Like, you're, as someone who is coming to a space and is offering representation, is offering some kind of you're occupying a positive space. You're kind of presenting a sort of, I don't know if I like the word role model so much, but you're presenting I guess a positive image, and you have an interest in the conversation about how to improve race relations, improve the quality of life for Black people in general, right? And would that be accurate to say?
Yeah.
So how do you reconcile that larger purpose of doing work that benefits Black people overall with the alienation that you've felt from certain other people of color?
That actually pushes me more forward to do more stuff and be interested in just like to tell them that I can do this too. Because like when like the injustice that have been happening, when Black people were being killed, they didn't just sit there. They stood up more and let their voice be heard. So like I shouldn't be silenced by what they say. It just pushes me more to be more involved, to just tell them that I can even do better than them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can you guys tell me more about your friendships, about the kinds of people that you surround yourself with?
I would say a lot of like my high school peers who are students are pretty active in boosting voices in the same way that I am. Where I come from, it's typically Republican voters, which whatever, vote who you, vote for who you want to, but it's discouraging to see the fact that the Black Lives Matter signs have been vandalized and taken out of yards. And at some point, where do you draw the line between social issues and political debates? I feel like that line gets blurred way too often. But going back to relationships, we have a social justice club at our school that's new this year, and I feel like students are really taking the lead because we can't vote. So our only option is to try to motivate the adults in our lives to realize these are issues that we want maybe not solved, because I don't think it's going to be a quick fix. No. But at least start pushing towards the solution. And the only way we see fit to do that is by striking up these clubs and stuff and just making posters and getting the word out there.
Did the students set up the club?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's tight. That's tight.
Yeah. Do you have any family members or close friends who have, political affiliations, political beliefs that are vastly different from yours that you've had to manage? Like your relationships
Yes.
that you've had to manage? Tell us about that. What's that been like for you?
So I do have family members who see things very opposite to me, which I'm lucky enough that they are reasonable and listen to my side, and I can listen to their side. But it was a lot of me coming to realize, not everyone always agrees with me, which that's how the world runs, and that's what is needed. But I'm trying not to offend anyone. If, I don't know, conversations come up like this and they're hard because my family members are on the complete opposite side to me. I'm very into like fixing social issues versus they are kind of hesitant to do that, and they don't really see these issues the same way that I think I do. Maybe I don't, but So
where does that hesitancy come from?
I'm not really sure, to be completely honest with you. I mean, I think the person I'm thinking of specifically likes to tell me that you can't always believe the media, which I think is true. You can't always believe the first thing you hear. But when there are firsthand recordings of these brutalities happening, of Black people being killed, you can't deny that it happened. And yeah, it's definitely been a topic over the summer during lockdown that we've had plenty of conversations about. But yeah, I am lucky enough to be able to have my own opinion and voice my own opinion in my home. So.
What about you, Julius? Are there people in your life who have political beliefs or beliefs about the world and about the way life should be that are very different from your beliefs?
Yeah, they are. They're like some family members. They tell me that being involved in this kind of things is dangerous, but they still tell me that I'm making a difference, but it's super dangerous. So like, I don't know if they want me to just sit around. But I do want to surround myself with people who have positive thoughts about the future, people who like making a difference, and people who have like the same kind of perspective as me. Like everyone has a different perspective, but people who look forward to something similar to what I look forward to. For example, like people who look forward to changing this country so that there won't be any more racism. It's not something that will happen now, but to people who look forward to changing it later in the future. To start now, but that's gonna happen later. Yeah, there's like a saying that says, show me your friends and I'll tell you your future. So I do try to surround myself with people with positive thoughts. Yeah, people who are good for me, people who lift me up anytime. Yeah, and who are like people who are honest with me, who will tell me like you're heading in a good direction or a bad direction, and then I know how to change myself.
And your relatives, are you referring to relatives who are here in the U.S. as well, or are these relatives who are still in Rwanda? Or is it a mixture of both?
It's a mixture of both.
Could you give any insight as to how you might suspect their specific background as Rwandan immigrants or Rwandan nationals may, kind of color or shape their perspective on things? And how that maybe clashes with your experience. Since you're now in America, I would argue that to a certain extent, you're being Americanized just through living here. Like maybe can you give us a more vivid picture of that?
Yeah, so like in my country, it's not really safe to just say whatever you want about the government. Some people get killed just like for what we're doing now. Like if you do that in my country, there's a high percent chance that you might get killed. So a lot of people in my country and my relatives try not to talk about it unless you're like a judge, that's your job. But if you're not, they expect you to stay silent. So my relatives thinks that it is similar to here too, so they want me to just stay silent. But my parents are supportive of what I do.
I think that these moments of pushing social change requires a lot of personal evolution and not just looking out at other people and thinking, oh, my perspective is better or more intelligent than yours, I'm more evolved than you, because we all have growing to do. In this period, not just in 2020, but certainly I think in all of our formative years, can any of us talk about moments in which we had a very defined or very different thought or perspective on an issue relevant to race, relevant to identity, that was changed in some kind of situation, something that you think back on as a very formative moment and that maybe, altered your perspective on something?
Yeah, I can actually do that. So just growing up where I actually grew up in like Avondale, and that's like nicknamed Afghanistan. I don't know if you know that. And a lot of the people I grew up around were always like F the police, da da da. You'd see the police cruising, people would just be grilling, just mad at the police, even though police officers weren't, at least when I was seeing them, doing anything that was unjust. It seemed like they were just, you know what I'm saying, patrolling or doing their jobs. But I remember there was a point, I guess it's kind of like code switching, changing my behavior so I'm cool around certain people, changing how I talk. I think after doing that for so long at a really young age, that kind of, whatever you're code switching kind of becomes you, you know what I mean? And my personality became everybody else's personality that I was hanging around. And I think when I got in high school, I really started realizing police aren't just inherently evil because they're police. That was not high school. I'd say probably 7th grade. High school is a little too late to make that realization, in my opinion. But then sometimes you think because there are police officers who are corrupt, and this is just how the world works. There's always going to be corruption. If there's power, somebody with power is going to be corrupt. And depending on how much power they have, it could get even worse or whatever. But I think because my dad knew a lot of police officers personally, like as friends, and meeting them it made me realize, wow, this was a stupid belief I had, that police officers were bad because they're police. And that's kind of like a black culture thing in black community. It's just cool to say, you know, F the police. And I think I'm not gonna blame NWA, but they had a whole hit record of that, and that was cool to the black community because it was NWA, and that's kind of like a legacy that they left behind. And when you're young, you're easily influenced, and you don't know these police officers, but you probably listening to this artist who you feel like you know because you listen to them all the time, watch interviews, their videos, you got merchandise, all that. So you have this connection with this person, but you don't have a connection with this person. And the person that you have a connection to is telling you don't trust these people, and you just go with what they tell you. And it's kind of like a cycle. And I was able to break out of that cycle. And then I really looked at myself, my beliefs, in a different perspective after that. And some of it was ignorance. I wasn't really on social media much until I got to high school. And then I started actually, you know, researching things, and just being educated really helped. And what else? Also, I had to, since I'm an older brother too, I had to kind of lead by example. So I had to be more responsible. And I think when you, for me at least, when you grow to a certain point where you can see that the beliefs you had were wrong, you can start questioning all the other beliefs you have and change them accordingly. If some of the stuff is like really immature, like I think the F the police is actually immature to a degree, because you kind of just saying it because it's cool. You know what I mean? And some people actually would believe it. I know a lot of people after the George Floyd incident were really feeling that, and especially the protests. A lot of police were heavily armed, and it was just it's a peaceful protest, but it almost felt like they were anticipating something bad and the need of heavy weaponry. But at the same time, I try and see it from everyone's perspective. Like, the people that you saw with those big old guns were literally told to do it. It's not like that was their idea. It's their job, and they had to do it because they were told by whoever was in charge of them to do it. So I think when I got to a level of maturity and responsibility, it was easier for me to have my own opinions and my own mindset. And for earlier question, your first question, I misunderstood it when you were asking what my role was. So here at Elementz, I feel like we give people, the artists or whoever comes in here for a membership, I feel like we help them not only find their voice, but we also boost it too. There are people who come in here who are spoken word artists who want to hone their spoken word craft so they can be more expressive. And then one thing that Elementz did to help them boost their voice is we'll put them in a showcase. We'll put them in front of people so they can say what they want to say, and so they can use their voice that they come here to, use. And with rap, I hang around a lot of artists too. Everybody has their own mindset, like I said, and their own opinions.
Their own what?
Mindset.
Oh, okay.
And their own opinions and everything. And just being able to express that. Like here, I help record people. If they need help releasing their music, I'll help them release it to the public. So that's like boosting their voice. Whoever they reach is who they reach. And what else? This podcast. It's another way that I feel like Elementz helps. And that's really important to me. Giving people, well, not necessarily giving them their voice because they already have it, but showing them that if they're not using it, that they should be using it, and they can, and helping them get an audience. And so that's what I think my role is. Had to bring that back.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you did.
I heard everybody else answer. I was like, whoa, I was way off. I was over there. Nah, it's all good,
I'm glad you did. You had a really strong response. Like you were really nodding your head when I asked about, like change perspectives. What was it that made you, have that reaction?
Well, this kind of adds on to your point is a lot of when the protests first started, like really picked up in the summer, it was ACAB. Everyone was saying it. And I have friends who she's related to a cop in Madeira. And I know every single cop in the police force there. And they're all great people. And I feel like it's not the people that we're criticizing. It's they're, of course, corrupt ones, but it's the system that we're criticizing. It's the same thing when people say defund the police. We don't mean take away all of their money. We mean reorganize their funds in a way that is more beneficial towards communities. And I will say that when these things first started coming out, I was very quick to jump on the gun and say oh yeah, this is what I believe. And then I was lucky enough, I had the resources to do more research and say, oh, well, this isn't actually what it means. So it was definitely a mind shift between the beginning of summer and now. And this is not, it kind of relates, but I'm part of the LGBTQ community, and their rights are a huge thing for me. So I'm fighting both battles, but in a way they're the same battle because it's for these social justices. Black trans females are disproportionately affected and killed, which is terrible. So I feel like everyone's voice needs to be heard and needs to be boosted at some point.
Julius, was there anything you wanted to add on that?
Not really, but I just wanted to say, people nowadays are silenced. It's like the Black Lives Matter thing was just like a trending thing. Now it's over, but injustice is still happening. And I just want to say, we're here to still keep that going until it's over, until it's finished. Well, it won't happen now, but until people just understand that it's not just a trending thing. Mm-hmm. A trending thing. Mm-hmm. People still need to say something. It's not just something that happened and now it's stopped happening, which is why they stopped. It's something that's still happening and they should still be protesting or doing something about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what do you think are those other long-term solutions that societies, that, you know, marginalized groups themselves, privileged groups, the white community, the black community, you know, the purple community, you know, what do you feel that we need to be doing on a long-term basis to sustain this fight? Because I'm so enthusiastic to hear that you're from Avondale, because my most recent story that I'm promoting for this week is on Avondale, and is actually looking back at the riots that happened in the community in 1967 and 1968.
I wasn't around.
So I've been, yeah, I mean, obviously it well
I'm just
predates
kidding.
you, but as you know, I'm sure that the, you know, unfortunate nickname of Afghanistan is stemmed from the blight that, you know, was brought to the Avondale area as a result of those riots from the late 60s. Like, am I assuming correctly?
Yeah, I know. It's kind of vague what I know. I don't know too much in detail. I can only tell you what people have told me who lived in Avondale. Those people I was telling about earlier when I was little, their parents, telling everybody to be safe, don't do this, don't do that in Avondale. And then list reasons why. I know about all the violence. I know about the killings. I honestly didn't know too much about the riots, though.
Yeah.
So that's new for me.
Yeah, I mean, I just make that connection there because a big part of the conversations I was having with people in that community, like, you know, older people who were either maybe participating in the riots themselves, you know, people who just got stuck out there in the activity and ended up getting arrested on the side of the street, or who were out on the street photographing what was happening. You know, they lived through these scenes that in a lot of ways were very similar to, maybe not necessarily what was happening this year in Cincinnati, because we didn't have really any much as intense riot activity as there were in other cities like in New York, Minneapolis, or Atlanta. You know, but a lot of those more extreme scenes that were happening elsewhere, that happened here in Cincinnati, that happened in Avondale. So part of the conversation I was having with these people who have lived through these cycles of these racial uprisings, these racial reckonings, is what do you feel is needed to sustain? You know, what do you feel is needed so that it's not just like this trendy thing in this chapter of history, and then we move on and we forget about it and we do something else, and all of a sudden Black Lives Matter is not coming up in the news anymore. And I guess that's part of my responsibility is to, you know, right, to keep sustaining the conversation. So yeah, what do you feel like people we need to keep doing?
I think one thing is responsibly using social media. Because a lot of people voice their opinion, you know, their beliefs on social media, but a lot of people aren't educating on social media.
Can I add to that, actually?
No, I'm playing.
Because I see that a lot as a teenager who Instagram is where I get a lot of my fast facts and stuff. It's where I see the headlines. Because what was it called on the internet for a while? It was I don't know, people were sharing these infographics on their Instagram stories, and that was really all they were doing. They weren't doing further research. They weren't talking to people about it. They weren't having the conversation that needed to be had. Which, of course, that's the first step, is putting these on your story and making people aware. But you need to do further research and gain more information to back up these opinions that you are so quick to agree with.
Yeah, because awareness isn't the same as education. It's not the same as being taught.
That's okay. Yeah, great point. Joyous, did you want to add to that?
For me, is what we're doing now is a good thing. This is helpful, but people can also do more. Because in America, they have more freedom, unlike my country. Not to say my country is bad. I love it and all. It's a good country, and I'm glad I was born there. But people need, since they have more freedom, they need to put their voice up. Their voice needs to be heard more, and what we're doing now is that's the first step. And people need, like they said, they need to put it on their story, share it. If they need to protest, they can do that too, as long as it helps, as long as it's gonna change something, as long as the government will keep it in mind that people are still people's voices still needs to be heard. Yeah.
I think when people know, like the whoever will listen to this hears your story, I think that'll really give them definitely a different perspective. And I think it's important to always like you know that you have privileges in this country, and even just citizens of this country know that they have privileges, rights. But if they lived in a different country, they wouldn't have those rights. And I think it's taken for granted. I think it's important to see that and to know that you have these things, so you should use them responsibly. And that goes back to what you were saying about the platforms that you have and that you want to use. We all have access to multiple platforms, especially with social media now. The internet, you could talk to almost anybody. You could just search their name on Google or whatever. If you want to talk to a senator, you can literally talk to one. And things like that it's easy. You have the access, but a lot of people don't know or they don't care. And I think when they hear stories like yours or similar stories, that it'll give them that perspective they need to be more responsible. 'Cause I think responsibility is a big thing.
Sorry. That's a really good point, because a lot of people have used the argument, oh, well, we have a lot of privileges compared to other countries here in America. And I agree. There are really great things about America because we are able to voice our opinions. But at the same time, there's still progress to be made. Like, we have a good basis to start. And I feel like a lot of people just say, oh, well, we're great where we are, because a lot of these issues don't affect them. So that's my piece on that.
That's why it's important for them to get that experience like you did, the firsthand experience where you actually saw, like yourself with your eyes, people that were saying, they experienced this or they experienced that. A lot of people are comfortable, and you'll find it more with people who have a lot of privilege. They're comfortable where they are, and they don't feel the need to, be involved because it's not affecting them, like you said.
Yeah.
But I have no idea where I was going with that sentence, but I still felt the need to say it.
No, I'm glad that you did. I'm sorry, I thought you were going to interject earlier.
Yes. I feel like people should not take the right they have for granted. They should take advantage of that and use it as an opportunity to change, and just to change America. I feel like America, since it's a big country and has more rights, they should be like the best example to the rest of the countries. Like, the other countries should look forward to this, but if it's broken, like, other countries can be better than America too, but it's hard for other countries to be better than America, since like America is the biggest. They should also lead by a good example.
I don't know. I never really bought into the idea. I mean, obviously, America has certain advances. Like, there are obvious privileges that we have. There's a certain level of stability that we have in comparison to other impoverished countries, like another place that I've lived. We are ahead in certain ways, but I guess growing up, even though I was born in the U.S., I grew up in a family that was mostly not born in the U.S. I grew up in an immigrant family. And so my identity and connection to this country has always been kind of splintered. And because I have those splintered familial ties, I always had a relationship to a country outside of the U.S. that made me, I think, recognize that I guess there's not much. I felt there wasn't much point in putting America on a pedestal in a way that I wouldn't put a pedestal, put my family's home country of Guyana on a pedestal, even though my family chose to leave and live somewhere else, So I don't know. I don't know if I feel like 2020 was a year in which America was forced to recognize that we possibly could actually really learn a lot from other countries. And that while there are certainly things that we are able to model and that other countries emulate, quite literally, the Liberian government is literally a replica. It's a replication essentially of the U.S. government. But yeah, again, I think that there's so many other things that other countries around the world can teach us that we can learn from. And frankly, I think that's a big reason as to why I've enjoyed my work as a foreign correspondent in past chapters of my life, and why I personally want to go back into that space. But anyway, something else that I wanted to ask you all is, in addition to finding news headlines, infographics, information through social media, how else are you consuming the news? What are your habits on that? I'm just genuinely curious.
I really don't watch the like actual news on TV. One thing that I've always done, at least after I hit high school, was people would tell me da 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 da, or I'd see something on the internet, and then I'd research it. That's just how I've always been since high school. I'd research it and try and figure out what I would think instead of what they're trying to get me to think. And then if what I think happens to be the same thing as what they think, then that's cool. But just having my own, getting to my conclusion myself is important to me. But that's how I've always done the news. And a lot of stuff, like local stuff, I don't really hear about it too much unless somebody who was involved somehow, maybe a relative of if someone got killed or something unjust happened. Especially down here, because working at Elementz, I almost know too many people downtown. And I kind of have a first hand, or if not second hand. No, I'll say second hand. Because, they'll tell me. I just literally will get told by somebody who was most likely involved in some kind of way. And then it's just a conversation like that. That's pretty much how I get most of my news, though. Because I don't watch TV. I don't like the commercials.
Okay. Yeah. Chloe?
I get most of my stuff. Well, I like to try and get most of my information through like firsthand footage because, I mean, obviously the person who's taking the video is going to be on one side of the argument, but it's stuff that's happening right now. And chances are it's unedited. Sometimes it is. But I feel like that's where I would like to see media go, in that it's just the truth. But I mean, I get the Apple News on my phone. Like, I get the notification. I'll watch the local news in the morning before school. Not so much anymore because we're online. But I like to attempt to get my news from different sources. It's not always easy living in a family of 5 when we all just have different things we want to watch. But yeah, I feel like one of my core values when it comes to big topics relating to social justices is see both sides, look at both sides of the coins, and see where I land after getting informed on both opinions.
Yeah. So just to backtrack a little bit and hear more about your perspective on seeing the original footage, like seeing things that I guess are in general just more uncut. Are you saying that you wish the news, especially broadcast media, because obviously I take interest in your perspective on that
Right.
as a broadcast journalist. Like, are you saying you wish you could see more live, uncut coverage? Because obviously, particularly in network news and cable news, punditry is huge. Like the news media, the broadcast media landscape has taken such a giant shift towards that because it draws large audiences and it's much less expensive to produce than original field reporting.
Right.
So are you saying that you wish you could see less of that kind of thing and more so like live streams or live reporting of things that are happening in the world or happening in the US?
Yeah. one of the things that I like have very specific memories of in the beginning of the summer was I was up late with friends on a call, and we were watching the live streams of the protests in the biggest cities, like Oregon was a big one, Seattle.
Yeah, right.
I forget the super big ones because it was a while ago, but I just remember thinking, why haven't I seen this in local media? Why? It's not censorship by any means, but sometimes it feels like that. Sometimes I feel like I'm not getting the full like scale of it, because I feel like if more people were able to see that, they'd be like, oh, so this is what's actually happening, or they'd be more moved by the like filtered stuff. Because obviously, I mean, as a reporter, you can't put in every detail. That's just not possible. So I feel like live broadcasts are super, super important.
Yeah. I mean, it's tricky because, it's with local news especially, our job is to report local news. Our job is to report oftentimes hyper local news. So I think there's a tension between how do we incorporate and how do we prioritize what's happening in the country and in other areas of the country that are having a huge impact, but how do we also keep up with what's immediately happening within our own backyards? And also, how do we perhaps, I wouldn't say that local stations, certainly not WCPO, we don't make editorial decisions in a way that base a lot, that put a lot of value on what perhaps the network might be doing that day as well. We are fairly independent entities. And the national network, newsrooms, they serve a different purpose. Their purpose is to be able to tell an audience in Cincinnati more details or show more footage of what's happening in Seattle versus, for example, the WCPO station. But I can certainly hear what you're saying about how there's always room to improve in terms of giving people a wider scope of what's happening and what they should know about, and also perhaps what they would also be interested in knowing about. Yeah. What about you?
I get my information from Instagram
Okay.
and Facebook, but I try not to believe what I see. So when I see something that really catches my eyes, I go on Google, and first I read the comments though. I read the comments and try to see what different people said about it, and then I go on Google and try to find like trustful platforms, because like social media, everybody posts what they want.
Yeah, that's another huge topic. Yeah.
So it's hard to tell whether like it's editing, whether someone is trying to like just give everyone a bad view, or so I really try to not believe what I see first and do a lot of research about it. And then the more I see of something, the more I start to believe it. So like when I search on Instagram and Facebook and Google, and I go to YouTube, and they all mostly like the bigger perspective or the bigger view, like what people are mostly talking about, that's what I'm more likely to hear the most. But then when I go into deep about it and I read it, sometimes I have a different perspective too.
When you find news from a source that you're not familiar with, that perhaps you've never heard of before, or you've only seen a few times in passing, how do you determine if it's trustworthy or not?
Like I said, I read the comments. So when there's a trustworthy site, there will most likely be people who watch it, or people who put a comment about it or say something about it. And then depending on what they say, I decide whether it's like true or not.
I wanted to, like, the reason why I was asking you all about your media consumption habits is because another thing I was curious to hear is whether you have any specific perspectives on how the news media can maybe do a better job of covering race, of covering this moment of, racial reckoning, of continuing to advance the conversation through the reporting in the upcoming years. Because there's been a lot of reform in the news media and a lot of conversation about how to adjust our practices and our journalistic ethics so that we're keeping up with the times, we're keeping up with people's perspectives, people's needs, the zeitgeist, all of that. So what do you have any thoughts on that? And is there anything you feel the news media could do to have a better hold of your interest so that you're not, your first instinct isn't to go to Instagram or Facebook for the news?
I feel like they can be more controlling.
More controlling?
Yeah, like of what goes out and of what people post, they can control that.
You mean like social media, or you mean the news?
Social media.
Oh, okay. Yeah. What about the news media? What about like for example, I don't know if any of you watch Channel 9 News. Please do not feel uncomfortable if you don't watch our station. But if you do watch, WCPO, or if you don't really watch and you feel like there are things that could be done that local TV stations like ours could do to better hold your interest when we are reporting on race and, social issues, social justice, is there anything you feel that we could expand on, we can improve on?
I think it's difficult. I think for two reasons. Reason one is you have to understand the perspective. Why would I watch the news if I have literally a computer inside of my pocket, and you get the notifications on your phone, and you're pretty much aware of what's going on that way. And then you have people in your family that's going to talk to you about it. And it makes watching the news not necessarily obsolete, but you have easier access to your phone than you would the news, especially if you live in a house where, like you said, you have family members who want to watch whatever they want to watch. So this would be what you pick.
Yeah.
Or the computer would be what you pick. But then I think for the news to do better, I feel like I don't know how you would go about executing this, but for being able to create some kind of connection to the audience. Because for the news, to me, I see a bunch of people dressed up because they're at work, not dressed comfortable, using language that they would use because they're at work. Everything's rehearsed to some degree. It doesn't feel like a real conversation. It doesn't feel like a conversation. It feels like a show. And it is a show. It comes on TV, but at the same time, you would want something that would feel real, that would feel genuine. And I don't get that from the news, but from someone like you, a reporter that's out, going out, like field reporters, you get that with them because there's an actual conversation that you're having. It's back and forth. With the news, it's just very one-sided. They tell you this, that. You can't talk to them. You can't, whatever they're talking about.
Like the anchor who's in the station, there's no interaction there.
Yeah, there's no
But in
interaction.
the, odd, situation which you're doing a podcast with a local TV reporter, it feels like more accessible.
Yeah, definitely. And I think people will gravitate towards something like that more than they would gravitate to a show. And at least that's how I feel about it. And the other argument is also there's commercials in the news. No, I'll stop.
I mean, that's how I have a salary. Yeah. So we don't really have a choice.
Yeah, I know. I'm just kidding.
So much, unless people contributed, more to our programming. There's not really anything else we can do. But yeah, you wanted to add to that?
I will say that sometimes, and this is true of social media as well, the media feels like it's just for profit, and not necessarily for getting news out to the general public. And obviously you guys have to have a paycheck. But sometimes kind of what you said about how it doesn't really feel like a human connection. it kind of just feels like you're there because it's your job. And I'm sure all of you love your job, but there's no real connection, which is exactly what you said. So.
I feel like the news is more like for a fame thing. People post what they think like their followers are gonna want to see. They don't really post what they think is the truth in society. Like there's certain stuff when you post it, like you're gonna lose followers. So most people are afraid of that. So they just post what they think people will see. That's what I think. And that's what I see.
I kind of agree with that in like traditional media. They're big flashy headlines that's going to get views, which once again makes sense because it makes money. But I feel like at some point we can't always be focusing on the super big things. Like obviously it makes sense. If there's something detrimental happening to the community, it needs to be reported. But smaller things like this, getting opinions from the community, I think is really, really important. And I know some broadcasts do like podcasts. And I think things like that are really important just to connect with the viewers more.
For sure. Because people do appreciate the small things. Because, you know, every media outlet is going to do, like if there's a big story, every media outlet's going to be on it. But not every media outlet is going to, you know, cover the small things that is happening. And because you might not be directly affected by whatever the big incident or the big story is in your community. Like if something happened in Oregon, I can't really connect to that because I don't live in Oregon. But if, you know, my community, if something's going on and then you cover that, then I'll definitely feel a sense of connection there. But actually, once again, I did not know where that sentence was leading, but I still said it. That's pretty much it. Ooh.
Yeah. But I think we've been talking for like an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like we've kind of come to the end.
It's dark outside.
Yeah, I'm wondering, like, you know, I don't know. I guess what's a good like closing conversation?
Like back to earlier, I feel America is great, but I feel like to what I said before, there's some things America can try to do better and learn from other countries too. Like all these different countries can try to teach each other one thing or two. Yeah.
Facts. There's something to be learned for sure. I think people should use their privilege and resources and rights, because in a country like where you're from, if you try and use any of that, you probably will get harmed some kind of way. So I think that's important. And you know, education is important too.
Yeah, I think the main thing to take away from this is that we need to make, obviously information is very accessible to everyone, but people need to start going out and looking for that information rather than just reading the headlines and forming their opinion on that.
Cool. Well, this has been a really great conversation today. Thanks
Drops
so much
mic
for
and
inviting
leaves.
me. It's been a real pleasure to hear your perspectives and to, you know, be taken out of my own little, you know, local TV news bubble as well, to talk to more people in the neighborhood and to specifically talk to young people, you know. So yeah, thanks so much for spending the time and for sharing your insights. I think this has been a really valuable conversation.
Definitely.
And I hope we get to do it again soon.
Big facts, no lies detected, or as the cool kids would say, no cap. I'll stop. But thank you all for coming out, and you're about to get a round of applause from the machine. It's going to be a generic round of applause, but it's still a round of applause. This is Noah Halls from Elementz. Thank you for tuning in to our podcast. Elementz is a youth center downtown Cincinnati centered around hip-hop and community. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and if you want to get more involved, you can come down to our center, located at 1640 Race Street. This video was brought to you by Democracy and Me, Elementz, the Kennedy Heights Art Center, and Tellus Zine. Tellus Zine is a digital publication led by an all-youth editorial board, showcasing visual, art, and creative writing by young adults from across greater Cincinnati. Tellus's mission is to provide a platform for young people to express themselves bravely and creatively as a part of our diverse community. Tellus Zine is sponsored by the Kennedy Heights Art Center with support from the Charles H. Dater Foundation and ArtsWave.